Okay, hello everyone. Here is what we are going to examine today for Sumer. We're going to talk about Sumerian achievements and inventions. So you'll see here it says the big idea that I want you to take away from today's lesson. There are a few. The first is that the Sumerians made many advances, which are inventions and those achievements, that helped their society develop. That's the main idea here, the big idea, the central idea. The underlying main ideas are broken down into two things. How did Sumerians have many advances that helped develop their society? Well, they invented the world's first writing system, the first that we know of in world history for human beings, and they were advances and inventions of the Sumerians changed their lives, it improved their lives. Usually when we say it changed their lives, it was an improvement. So the first main idea is that they created or invented the world's first writing system. And as a vocabulary word, the writing system was called cuneiform. Cuneiform. It's the system of writing that involved the use of sharp tools called styluses. And so they would take that stylus, sort of like you have a stylus for a tablet today, and they would actually use a piece of clay, like a tablet of clay in their hand, and they would take a sharp stylus, which is kind of like a little, piece that would carve out. They would carve out that soft clay, and then they would leave that clay in the sun, and it would harden, and then that was, sort of like the first way in which that they recorded their writing for permanence. So the language that they used is called cuneiform, their written system, and they used a stylus to carve out soft clay before they hardened it in the sun to make it permanent. So the Sumerians first used cuneiform as a way to keep business records. If I sell cows and chickens and somebody buys a bunch from me, that's a business transaction. It's a business record. And so it's kind of like a receipt. If you go to Walmart and you buy something and you pay for it, they give you a receipt to show that's your business record. And Sumerians would also use their writing skills to write books and stories, one of which we'll talk about this week. History, they wrote down the great leaders and events that happened in their history. Poems, and a lot of their inventions were only possible because they were calculating advanced math. And that's a big part of it, and they had to write down on clay those things. And so when it comes to business records, that can be used when they're talking about how much to tax someone as well. Moving on here, the invention of writing has three parts to it. So that cuneiform is the world's first writing system. The cuneiform are symbols that represented syllables, and several syllables would be added or put together, combined together to create a word. Before this writing system, earlier writing systems were called pictographs, where they just had like a single symbol or object that represented an entire idea. And again, the Sumerians wrote on clay tablets, carving in with a stylus, kind of like this right here, a wet clay tablet. Wet clay means soft clay, and they're carving it out. And then they put it in the sun, and it would dry and harden. The people that were the writers, not everyone had the ability to read and write in ancient Sumer. In fact, very few people had the ability to read and write, and it took about 12 years of education to become what was called a scribe. And they were rather important people in society because they had that knowledge, because they had that skill. And these are the writers of cuneiform. And so they would keep track of items people traded and wrote down government records as well as laws. And scribes could move up in the social class once they received those 12 years of education. There are less of them, and they have a very specific, knowledgeable skill. And as we learned in our last lesson, knowledge is power, and it moves you up in society, in the ranks. So scribes were actually very important people. They had a good life. They made a decent amount of money, and they were well respected. And they were used by priests, and they were used by the rulers themselves. So they're like the right-hand man that has the ability to write down what was being discussed by the important people. Other uses for this cuneiform writing system, they wrote works of literature, which are stories, proverbs, and songs. They wrote poems about the gods. They wrote about their military victories. Everybody loves to brag about a military victory. And they created epics, which are long poems that tell the stories of heroes. This is an example of an actual clay tablet that archaeologists unearthed as an artifact, and this is the development of the cuneiform writing system. So the idea is heaven, the gods live in heaven. I told you, we talked about how religion is so important to these people, and so in the year 3300 BCE, this is what the heavens looked like, and you can see how over the course of about 1,500 years that symbol evolved. Same with the idea for grain, fish, bird, and water. And those, you can see the evolution of those symbols, and those symbols will be put together right here on a clay tablet, and that's what cuneiform looked like in the very beginning, and that's how it developed over the course of a little over 1,500 years. And the second main idea is that these advances and inventions of Sumerians changed their lives, improved their lives. And so they're the first civilization to develop the wheel. And that means that they used advanced math in order to create a wheel. It's 360 degrees all the way around. That's what a circle is. The first early uses for the wheel are for wagons to pull heavy loads of whatever it is that trade goods or crops and get it farther away from where you are if you want to travel with it a long distance. They also used a potter's wheel where they would manually step on a pedal, and the pedal would turn a wheel like a plate, a flat plate, a circular plate wheel, and then you put your hands on the clay that's on that wheel, and as it's turning, and as you're manipulating it to turn, you can shape it in different ways, and pottery is really cool because this is how they were making the things they needed for their society. Also, the plow increased their farm production and improved the speed and the manner in which they could plow the ground to turn the soil over and put seeds in for farming, so it sped up their farming. And if you speed up your farming, then you speed up your food production, and that means that you increase the surplus that your society has. They also invented the idea of sewers under the city streets that would take waste away from the city and away from the streets themselves, so that human waste wasn't just piling up and it starts to smell and it's bacteria and it gets people really sick. And so that was a great invention to get the waste away from the city, away from the population. They used math and science. They had a number system based on 60. And the names of animals, plants, and minerals were categorized by them as well. They even used some early ways to heal, and they had various medicines and medical knowledge. They knew they knew a little bit about the human body, more than most humans had at that time period. This is a lot to take in for you, but it's really cool to see in one place a few ways that these inventions help to improve their lives. The wheel helps to improve their life. Having carts and wagons helps to improve their life. Creating pottery that's more advanced and fancier and more unique improves their life. The plow improves their ability to produce food and agriculture, and that's huge. Removing waste and bacteria minimizes disease. Math and science, which we still use today, of course, a number system based on 60. And you can even look at like 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 360 degrees in a circle. These are all advancements that the Sumerians had. And one last thing they used math for was engineering. And this is something I've showed you previously, but it is a ziggurat. And a ziggurat is a large pyramid type of palace or temple that the priests and kings would either live in or work in and build. And it is essentially like an Egyptian pyramid where it helps them to leave their legacy. And this is also where religion would be occurring. Make sure that you are also reading the section in the textbook on the PDF that I put in classroom materials for today. You're reading on the PDF pages 18 to 22, and then working in that Google Doc to answer the questions.